Local governments across Colorado are being hampered by drops in funding because of a provision in Colorado's Constitution. A provision that means that housing growth in the Front Range forces rural Colorado to do with less. This includes budget restrictions for road funding, public safety, and emergency medical services in other areas of Colorado, particularly the areas whose property tax base consists mostly of housing property, like Grand County, which is 63% residential. That provision is the Gallagher Amendment. In 1982, voters passed the Gallagher Amendment to the Constitution that changed the way homes were appraised, and it also required that the amount of property taxes collected from homes statewide could never account for more than roughly 45% of total property tax collections statewide. The amendment means that the remaining 55% of property taxes must come from non-residential property, like businesses and agricultural property. Gallagher also dictates the assessment rate for all property. What's the assessment rate? It's the percentage of a property's value that is subject to taxation. You don't pay taxes on the entire value of your home, only a portion of it. For example, if you have a $400,000 home and the assessment rate is 7.15%, you only pay property taxes on $28,600 of the home's value. That assessed value is multiplied by the locally approved mill levy. In Grand County, about 1/3 of the assessed mills fund the school district. A quarter of the mills fund Grand County for services such as road maintenance and public safety, and the remainder funds towns and special districts, like fire protection districts. Gallagher set the assessment rate on most non-residential property at 29%. That 29% rate means that the assessment rate for residential property must fluctuate to maintain the roughly 45-55 ratio. When Gallagher was added to the Constitution, the residential assessment rate was 21%. Throughout the 1980s, the growth in value of residential property outpaced increases in non-residential property values. With ever-rising residential property values, the assessment rate on homes had to be lowered to avoid residential property from bearing more than that 45% ratio. The assessment rate on homes fell to 18%, then 16%, then 15%. It hit 10.36% in 1995, then it fell to 7.96% in 2003. In 2017, it dropped to 7.2%. Then in 2019, it fell again to 7.15%, all the while increasing the disproportionate tax burden on commercial properties. The automatic rate drops hurt different parts of Colorado differently. Areas of Colorado that have a lot of non-residential property weren't impacted by the drop in the rate on homes as much as areas of the state, such as Grand County, with a property tax base consisting mostly of residential property. Grand County hasn't raised its mill levy since 2003, when the assessment rate on home property was 7.96%. That assessment rate is now 7.15%. The drops in the residential assessment rate means that the voter-approved mills are worth less. As county commissioners, we pride ourselves on running a lean and efficient government, despite increased costs due to tourism, population growth, and inflation. The reductions in the assessment rate caused by Gallagher make it hard to maintain even basic county services. And the problem will get harder in the coming years. Because residential property value increases continue to outpace non-residential value growth statewide, Gallagher will cause more drops in the residential rate in the future. In 2021, the rate is set to drop to 5.88%. That's nearly an 18% drop in the rate. That's why there has been a bunch of Gallagher-related issues on the ballots of Grand County residents over the last 2 years. Last year, for instance, 3 different fire protection districts serving Grand County all saw their voters successfully approve a de-Gallagherizing measure. Colorado's Constitution requires that each district vote separately on issues like this. So while voters may have de-Gallagherized their fire protection districts, Grand County is still subject to Gallagher's automatic reductions. This November, some residents in Grand County might have 3 or 4 different Gallagher-related questions on their ballot. Their town, county, and fire district might all be asking permission to de-Gallagherize. And it gets even more complicated. There is also a statewide Gallagher question on the 2020 ballot. The statewide resolution asks Coloradans to repeal the Gallagher Amendment so that the residential assessment rate doesn't fall in the future. If the statewide Gallagher repeal passes, the 7.15% rate on homes still can't be raised without voter approval because of Tabor. This November, Grand County residents will have the option to consider and express their opinion on this issue without waiting for the rest of the state to address it. If approved by the voters, Grand County's ballot measure would allow the mills to float up only enough to offset the revenue reductions from the next drop in the residential assessment rate. This would stabilize Grand County's budget without collecting more taxes. This educational video was written and produced by the Colorado Fiscal Institute in collaboration with Grand County.